I mean, just like the next person, I have used YouTube a lot, especially when it comes to DIY things or things that I would like to learn really quickly, like makeup. Like, I've used YouTube a lot. But when it comes to property investing, why doesn't it work?
Alright, so firstly, disclaimer, I've never used YouTube for makeup, alright? But I have used YouTube for a lot of stuff as well. And it's interesting, the best way to explain this is I was explaining it to someone recently, let's call them Lucy, right? So I was sharing with Lucy that in business, everything has always and will always be based on two factors. And those two factors are supply versus demand, okay? So think of it like this. If there is a high supply of something and there is a low demand for that thing, we all know what happens, the price goes down, right? And on the other hand, if there is a high demand for something, think Apple phones, etc., the latest iPhone, and there is a lower supply of that thing, but we all know what happens, the price goes up, okay? So here's the thing that most people haven't been informed of. Roughly in around the year 2000, 2003, we heard that we were going into the information age, okay? And what they told us was what we were going into, but they didn't tell us what that meant, okay? So what most people don't realize is that the information age means we're going into a time where information is going to far exceed in supply the actual demand. That makes sense, right? Okay, so that's the issue for property investing, and I can explain it so simply the way I explained it to Lucy now, okay? So this here is a book, and the interesting thing is on YouTube, there's lots of information. In this book, there's lots of information. And all the information in YouTube is absolutely free. That's correct, right? But a book today would cost you roughly £10 to buy. And a book 10 years ago would cost you roughly £10 to buy, right?
Correct.
And a book 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago would cost you still roughly £10 to buy, right?
Correct.
So a great question we should ask ourselves is, how comes a book has retained its value over all of those years, but the information on YouTube hasn't? And that gives us the reason and the answer as to why YouTube doesn't really work for most people who try to use it to learn property investing, property strategies, how to create colossal cash flow, how to create consistent cash flow. And here's the secret. The secret is found literally on roughly like the third page. It's around the third page. Apologies, I've got post-its and everything in my books, but roughly around the third page of every book, and that's called a contents page, okay? Now, you might be saying, Samuel, how does a contents page make the book retain its wealth all of these years? I'm so glad you asked. The reason the contents page allows a book to retain its value all this time is because a contents page is evidence that this is not just information.
Right.
It's evidence that this is organized information.
100%.
So the interesting thing is all the information on YouTube may actually be there for you to successfully invest in property. However, all the organization is not on YouTube in order for you to successfully invest in property. So when you ask the question, how comes, property investors can't actually learn how to invest properly through means of YouTube as a medium? Well, that's simply the reason, because YouTube lacks organization even though it has a plethora of information. Whereas books, for example, and I'm not saying, people are just going to learn from a book, but you have a better shot at learning successfully from a book, because a book will have a structure, a book will have an outline, a book will have a clear guide and credence as to how you are going to achieve that strategy, employ that specific approach, and literally generate that revenue. So in simple terms, the reason why is because YouTube lacks the organization, even though it has a plethora of the information, whereas other things like structured courses, structured programs, structured books have the organization as well as deploy the information.
That's powerful. So there's such a power in just having something that's organized and structured versus something that's, kind of just out there, sporadic, and can be easily accessible.
That's right, and this is one of the reasons why I think property investing should be taught in schools, because if you think about it, we go to school, we have primary school, you obviously taught in primary school, we have primary school, but in primary school you go from reception all the way to year 6, in secondary school we go from year 7 all the way to year 11, and if you're in a sixth form or a college, you then have year 12, year 13 before you graduate and then go into university. So the school system, although I'm not, the biggest fan, the school system gives you a structured, organized framework in order for you to develop up to what they call the general certificate of secondary education. So that structure is where the value is. It's not necessarily in the information. Like when you think of it like this, you start to understand that the information doesn't actually contain the value. What actually contains the value is the organization.
That's powerful. And what I find amazing is that obviously for it to be organized, it means that someone was purposeful about it.
100%.
And that's why when purpose has been put into it, you can get purpose out of it. So that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
100%.
So with that being said, I guess the aim is to look for something that is structured, organized, that can give you a wealth of information and knowledge so that you can invest in yourself and get the revenues back.
Perfect. So guys, if you really want to earn using property, then make sure you learn using an organized framework, an organized structure, and not just search for information in and of itself. See you on the next video.
Take care.